Daniel Mercer thought he already knew the worst kind of betrayal. 5 years earlier, his wife had walked out, told him she loved someone else, and left him with divorce papers he signed too quickly and understood too late. For years, that version of the story was the one he lived with. Marina wanted more freedom, more excitement, a different life. It was simple, clean, easy to hate, and completely wrong. Daniel just didn't know that yet, because on a cold Thursday night, inside one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city, the past he thought he had buried walked straight toward his table carrying a tray of crystal glasses. Pregnant, exhausted, trying not to be noticed. Daniel noticed her before he even realized why. She moved carefully between tables, one hand steadying the tray, the other hovering near the curve of her stomach in that instinctive way people do when they're protecting something without thinking about it. Then she looked up, and Daniel stopped breathing. It was Marina, his ex-wife. Her hair was pulled back in a hurried knot. There were shadows under her eyes and a strain in her face that hadn't been there years ago. She looked thinner, worn down, as if every day had become something she had to physically push through. And she was very pregnant. Daniel's hand froze above the final page of a 9-figure contract. Across the table, 2 investors were waiting for his signature. His attorneys sat ready. Everything had been set up for a perfect night. Then none of it mattered. "Daniel?" one investor asked quietly. He didn't answer. A floor manager stepped out from the side of the dining room, irritation already written all over him. "If you can't handle the section," he said coldly, "I'll find someone who can." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The humiliation was public enough. Marina didn't argue. She didn't defend herself. She only nodded once, the way tired people do when they know explaining themselves won't help. Daniel pushed back his chair and stood. The scrape of the chair legs against the stone floor cut through the room. Heads turned. "Marina!" Her name came out rougher than he meant it to. She stopped. When she turned toward him, there was no shock on her face, no tears, no performance, just exhaustion. And something else. Concern. "Please," she said softly. "Not here." That was when Daniel noticed the way her arm shifted protectively across her stomach. Not casually, defensively, as if she expected him to be a threat. His voice dropped. "Is it mine?" The question landed hard enough to quiet the nearest tables. A woman near the bar looked down too fast. A man halfway through his drink froze. Someone's phone appeared for half a second and vanished again. Marina swallowed. "Daniel," she whispered. "Don't." But he couldn't stop, because this wasn't how the story ended in his mind. In his memory, she stood in their kitchen near the window with a suitcase by the door and divorce papers on the counter between them. "I'm leaving." He had laughed then, a sharp, defensive laugh. "Say that again." She didn't look him in the eye. "I met someone." He remembered the way his hands locked on the edge of the counter. "You're lying." "I'm not." But her voice had cracked, and that tiny crack had come back to him more times than he wanted to admit. "Please sign." He signed. Not because he believed her, because some part of him thought she would stop him. Fight. Change her mind. Stay. She didn't. She walked out and closed the door softly behind her. That softness had haunted him more than a slammed door ever could have. After that, Daniel changed. Emotion became weakness. Trust became risk. Work became the only place where cause and effect still made sense. His company grew. His reputation hardened. People called him disciplined, precise, impossible to shake. Now Marina stood a few feet away, pregnant, exhausted, and working as a server in a room built to flatter rich men. Nothing about that matched the life she had supposedly left him for. "You said you found someone," Daniel said quietly. Her jaw tightened. "I said what I needed to say." "That's not an answer." Her hand drifted to her stomach again, and this time he saw it clearly. Fear. Not fear of his anger. Fear of the truth. She lifted her chin and forced the words out. "It isn't yours." He didn't believe her. Not because he had proof, because something in him knew. She turned to go, but the manager was already there, blocking the aisle. "So this is why table 12 is still waiting?" he said, louder now, crueler now. "I'm running a business, not a charity." "I'm doing my job," Marina said calmly, though her fingers were trembling. His eyes dropped to her stomach with open annoyance. Your job requires reliability. One accident and this place is liable. We don't run a restaurant on sympathy." No one stepped in. No one said a word. The room did what rooms like that always do when someone vulnerable is being cornered. It looked away. Marina took a small step back, breathing carefully, trying not to make things worse. And for the first time in 5 years, Daniel felt something crack underneath the controlled version of himself he had built. Not anger, not jealousy, something more dangerous. Doubt. Because Marina did not look like a woman who had traded up to a better life. She looked like a woman who had given one up. And Daniel Mercer suddenly wanted only one thing: the truth. Daniel Mercer had spent years teaching himself not to react. But when Marina's heel caught the edge of the service mat, instinct overruled discipline. The tray tilted. Crystal began to slide. A thin gasp moved through the room. Daniel moved before he thought. His hand shot out, catching the tray just before the glasses fell. The crystal rattled but didn't break. He steadied it, set it down on the nearest service station, and turned slowly toward the manager. "Say that again." His voice was quiet. That made it worse. The manager blinked, finally recognizing who he was talking to. "Mr. Mercer, this is an internal staffing matter." Daniel stepped closer. Not loud, not dramatic, just final. "You're humiliating a pregnant employee in front of paying guests while I'm sitting 10 feet away." The manager tried to recover. "She's unreliable." Daniel lifted 2 fingers. The man stopped mid-sentence. "Your name." A pause. "Victor Hale." Daniel nodded once, filing it away. Then he glanced toward the untouched contract, the waiting investors, the deal that had mattered 5 minutes earlier. When he looked back at Victor, his expression hadn't changed, but something colder had settled behind it. "You have 2 choices," Daniel said. "You apologize to her right now, or tomorrow you explain to the owner why this restaurant just lost every event my firm would have booked here for the next decade." Victor opened his mouth, closed it. The calculation was immediate. Marina grabbed Daniel's sleeve. "Daniel," she whispered, "please don't." There was real fear in her voice, not for herself, for him. But Daniel didn't look at her. Something older than anger had taken over, something unfinished. Her fingers slipped away. Then she turned and hurried toward the kitchen doors. Daniel followed, past the heat lamps, past shouted orders, past the smell of oil, garlic, and industrial soap. Then through the rear exit and into the alley behind the restaurant. The night air hit hard and cold. Marina kept moving, one hand on her stomach, the other skimming the brick wall when her breathing caught. "Marina." She didn't stop. "Marina." This time she slowed. Near a dented service container, Daniel stepped in front of her, careful not to touch her. Up close, without the flattering restaurant lighting, there was no missing what she had tried to hide. Exhaustion, cracked skin, chemical burns across her knuckles, the posture of someone who had been forcing herself through pain for too long. "Don't come any closer," she said. Her voice shook. Daniel's jaw tightened. "You don't get to disappear again." A hollow laugh escaped her. "I didn't disappear," she said. "I survived." That word hit differently. Daniel glanced at her stomach, then back at her face. "Tell me the truth. No audience now, no investors, no excuses. Is it mine?" For a second, she looked like the truth might physically break her. Then the wall came up. He recognized it instantly. Chin up, eyes flat, everything sealed off. "No, too fast. It isn't yours." Something inside him went cold. "You expect me to believe you left a stable life, got pregnant, and ended up here?" he asked. "You expect me to believe you never once tried to contact me?" She stared past him toward the streetlight. "Believe whatever makes it easier." Daniel took half a step closer. "I'm not walking away from this," he said. "If you keep lying, I'll find out the truth without you." Her breathing changed. "Please," she said, tired more than dramatic. "Please just let it go." He stepped back, not surrendering, adjusting. "You're shaking," he said. Only then did he really notice how badly. Her fingers were pressed hard against her stomach. Her knuckles had gone pale beneath the damaged skin. "You shouldn't even be standing out here." His eyes dropped to her hands again. The burns were worse up close. Red, raw, repeated. Not from one bad shift, from months of it. "Who did this to you?" "No one." Automatic. too automatic. Daniel nodded once. Then he pulled out his phone. Her eyes widened immediately. "What are you doing?" "Ending the part where I don't know what's happening." He called Marcus, the one person he trusted to move fast and dig deep. "I need a full background pull on Marina Keller," Daniel said. "Last 12 months. Addresses, jobs, money, pressure points, anyone leaning on her. And I want everything you can find on Victor Hale too. Complaints, prior issues, labor problems, lawsuits, all of it." A brief pause. "You expecting trouble?" Marcus asked. Daniel looked at Marina's face, at the panic she was trying so hard to hide. "I think trouble got here first." He ended the call. Inside the restaurant, the contracts still waited. The investors still waited. Victor Hale was probably already telling himself he had survived the moment. Daniel looked toward the glowing sign above the rear entrance. "I'm going to buy this place," he said. Marina stared at him. "What?" "When I do, no one here will ever speak to you like that again." Her voice cracked. "Daniel, don't." But he was already walking back inside. Not because he was done with her, because he was done being blind. He barely made it to the side corridor before his phone buzzed, then buzzed again. Marcus had moved fast. Daniel stepped into an empty marble hallway and answered. "What did you find?" Marcus sounded different now, tighter, concerned. "She never left the city." Daniel went still. "What?" "There's no foreign boyfriend, no travel records, no passport activity, nothing." Daniel stared at the wall like it might split open. "Where has she been?" "In a tiny sublet studio in East Harbor. Rough area, bad condition, barely enough room to live in." Daniel didn't speak. Marcus kept going. "She's been making regular payments. Small at first, then larger. Always to the same two people." Daniel already hated the answer before he heard it. "Names?" "Victor Hale," Marcus said, "and Adrian Kessler." That second name hit harder. Kessler was old history. A man who had once tried to damage Daniel's firm and failed. Apparently he hadn't forgotten. What did they want? Leverage? Revenge? "I found burner messages, threats. They told her if she didn't leave you and make you sign the divorce, they'd frame you. Financial misconduct. Enough to trigger investigations. Possibly prison." Daniel felt the air leave his lungs. "And Marina?" Marcus exhaled slowly. "She sold her ring, pawned jewelry, took cleaning jobs, then restaurant shifts, paid them to keep them away from you. A beat. She didn't betray you, Daniel. She took the hit for you." Daniel closed his eyes. Behind the walls, the restaurant still hummed with money and music and polished indifference. "And the baby?" A pause. No evidence of any other relationship. Daniel opened his eyes. Every ounce of fury in him had changed direction. He ran, through the dining room, past the investors, past Victor Hale, who stepped back the moment he saw Daniel's face, then out the rear door and into the alley again. "Marina!" No answer. Then he saw her, half collapsed against the wall, one knee awkward beneath her, one hand pressed hard to her stomach as if she were trying to keep herself together by force. Her skin looked pale under the security light. Sweat dampened her hairline despite the cold. Daniel dropped beside her. Hey, look at me." Her eyes flickered toward him, then lost focus again. "My head," she whispered. "It hurts." She swallowed hard. "I can't see right." His blood went cold. He noticed her ankles then, swollen. Her fingers too. Memory flashed. A doctor once mentioning pregnancy warning signs in a conversation Daniel had barely listened to. Headache, swelling, vision changes, danger. "How long?" he asked. She shook her head weakly. "Please," she whispered. "Go finish your deal. Don't make this worse." Even then, even now, still protecting him, Daniel was already calling emergency services. "Pregnant woman," he snapped. About 32 weeks, severe headache, vision changes, collapse. "We're behind Maison Aurelia on Halden Street." Marina tensed. "If Victor and Kessler find out, stop." His voice dropped low and fierce. "You are not carrying this alone anymore." The sirens came fast, too fast, which meant it was serious. Daniel had handled hostile takeovers with less panic than he felt watching a hospital team surround Marina. The emergency room swallowed her in minutes. Questions, blood pressure cuff, a nurse already calling for labs before the first form had printed. Daniel stayed close until a doctor in dark blue scrubs turned to him with the blunt focus of someone too busy to soften the truth. "Are you immediate family?" Daniel opened his mouth. No sound came out. The doctor didn't wait. "She is showing signs of severe preeclampsia. Her blood pressure is critically high. We're preparing for an emergency delivery. If we don't move quickly, we could lose both mother and baby." The world seemed to tilt. Daniel nodded too slowly. She didn't tell anyone." It sounded like an apology and a confession at the same time. A nurse glanced up from the monitor. 8 months pregnant, on her feet, underfed, overstressed, she said. "Sir, where exactly have you been?" That one hit harder than anything else that night. Daniel followed the team until a red line on the floor stopped him. Authorized personnel only. He stared at it like a border he hadn't earned the right to cross. Through the glass, he caught a glimpse of Marina on a gurney under bright lights. Hair damp, lips pale, nurses moving quickly around her. That was when he saw her hands clearly, raw, split, marked by repeated chemical burns. Not one bad day, months of survival. Marina turned her head slightly. Her eyes were unfocused, but they moved across the room like she was still searching for him. Daniel pressed his palm to the glass. "I'm here," he whispered. "I'm right here." He didn't know if she heard him. The doctor returned with consent forms. "We need signatures. And you need to understand, this baby will be premature." Daniel took the pen. The same pen he used for contracts, acquisitions, and decisions that changed other people's lives. For the first time in years, his hand was not steady. His signature came out uneven. The same hand that had once signed divorce papers without demanding the truth was now signing forms because delay could kill her. He gave the clipboard back, and in that moment he made a promise that felt carved into bone. Victor Hale and Adrian Kessler were not going to pay with inconvenience. They were going to lose everything. Time moved strangely after that. Every minute felt too long and too fast at once. Monitors sounded behind closed doors. Rubber soles crossed the hallway. Somewhere down the corridor, another baby cried in another family's story. Then the doors opened. A nurse stepped into the hallway, breathing fast but smiling carefully. "Mr. Mercer?" Daniel stood too quickly. "You have a son." Everything inside him lurched. "He's early," she said. "Very small, but he's fighting." Relief hit first, then fear followed. "And Marina?" The nurse hesitated just long enough to hurt. "She's stable," she said. "For now. The team is still with her." Daniel nodded, though the words didn't feel secure enough to stand on. When he was alone again, he leaned his forehead briefly against the wall and let out one raw breath. Then his phone buzzed. "Marcus." "I have enough to move," Marcus said. "Locations, burner numbers, transfers, messages. I also looped in the right people quietly." Daniel drifted toward the NICU observation window without meaning to. On the other side, a team was transferring his son into an incubator. He was impossibly small, wrapped in tubes and sensors, chest fluttering with furious effort. The monitor beside him beeped in a stubborn rhythm. Daniel's voice hardened. "Victor Hale and Adrian Kessler do not get another easy day." "They won't," Marcus said. "And Hale's record is worse than expected. Complaints, harassment, labor issues. We're packaging everything." "Good," Daniel said. "No quiet settlement, no payoff. I want charges." A physician approached then. "You'll be able to see your wife in recovery soon." Daniel almost corrected him. "My ex-wife." But the words died before they left his mouth. He looked at the incubator, at the child Marina had protected with her own body. "Not for long," he said quietly. By dawn, the threat was no longer theoretical. It had evidence folders, case numbers, names attached. Daniel stood in the hospital parking lot, cold cutting through his suit, while the city woke up around him as if nothing inside that building had changed his life. Marina was in recovery. His son was in the NICU. And somewhere out there, 2 men still believed they were untouchable. Marcus called again. "The package is in. Threat texts, transfers, witness statements. The prosecutor's office has it. I want them taken in today." "They're moving," Marcus said. "And there's more. They've done this before." Daniel didn't celebrate. He didn't gloat. He just closed his eyes and breathed once, slowly enough to hurt. Across the parking lot, 2 unmarked vehicles rolled in. No sirens, no show, just doors opening, officers stepping out. Daniel went back inside and stopped at Marina's room. She was pale, weak, barely awake. But when she sensed him, she turned her head. "Daniel," she whispered. There was still fear in her voice, as if truth might still punish her. He took her damaged hand with unbearable care. "They're not coming after you anymore," he said. "Victor and Kessler, it's over." Tears slipped quietly from the corners of her eyes. "I didn't want you hurt." "I know," he said, voice cracking at last. "And I'm done letting you pay for that alone." His phone buzzed once. A text from Marcus. "They're in custody." Daniel looked at the message, then at Marina. He leaned closer. "We're bringing our son home." The weeks that followed changed everything slowly. Not all at once. Not with one dramatic speech. Slowly. The way real damage heals. The way real trust comes back. Carefully, suspiciously. One lived detail at a time. Daniel stopped going into the office unless absolutely necessary. Board meetings happened by video. Contracts were reviewed from waiting rooms and family lounges. His assistant learned quickly that if a call couldn't compete with the sound of a neonatal monitor, it could wait. The NICU became the center of his life. It smelled like disinfectant, warm plastic, stale coffee, and fear that had learned to stay quiet. Nurses moved with impossible calm. They remembered names. They remembered which parents needed more explanation and which ones only needed someone to say, "He's stable this morning." Their son weighed just under 2 kilograms at birth. Tiny chest, impossible fingers, a face that looked unfinished and stubborn at the same time. Marina named him Leo. She told Daniel one evening in a voice still weak from recovery, "I didn't think you'd ever want to know him." Daniel stood beside the incubator for a long second before answering, "I want to know every second I missed." He said it so simply she had no defense against it. Recovery didn't make Marina softer overnight. It made her tired. It made her wary. Sometimes Daniel brought coffee she forgot to drink or soup she barely touched. Sometimes he found her standing outside Leo's room with both arms folded tight across herself, as if her body still expected the world to punish her for hoping. He learned not to crowd her. He learned that, "What do you need?" worked better than, "You should rest." He learned that when she woke too fast from shallow sleep, it was better not to ask what dream had followed her back. One night he found her near the hand sanitizer station, watching 2 young parents argue in whispers about bus fare, parking, and whether they could afford to both come back the next day. Daniel looked through the glass at the incubators lined in rows, at the tired shoes, the jackets used as pillows, the vending machine dinners. Something in him shifted for good. That afternoon he called Marcus. "I want this unit upgraded." Marcus blinked. "That's a major project." "So is keeping a 4-pound baby alive," Daniel said. "Do it." He was specific. New monitors, additional respiratory support equipment, more neonatal nursing hours, a family support fund so no parent had to choose between gas money and visiting their child. No gala, no press conference, no photo op, just results. By the end of the week, equipment began arriving quietly. Marina found him late one night sitting on a hallway bench outside the NICU. Not like a CEO, like a man who had finally reached the edge of his strength. His tie was gone. His collar was open. One hand covered his eyes for a moment before he noticed her. "You didn't have to do all this," she said softly. Daniel looked up. His eyes were tired enough to be honest. "Yes," he said. "I did." She stood still. He rose more slowly than he would have liked. "You carried the fear," he said. Then quieter. "You carried the pain." His gaze drifted through the glass toward Leo. "You carried him." He reached for her hand carefully. The skin was healing, but the tenderness was still there. "Now I carry us." For a second, she just looked at him. Then, for the first time in a long time, she didn't flinch. She leaned in and let him hold her. A month later, Leo took a full breath without machine support. Daniel didn't tell anyone. He didn't call the media team. He didn't announce anything. He simply stood in the NICU doorway with wet eyes and whispered, "That's my boy." For years, people had said nothing could make Daniel Mercer emotional. They had been wrong. Marina grew stronger in practical increments. 1 lap around the corridor, then 2. Color returned to her face. Some steadiness returned to her body. One afternoon, when she was finally cleared for a short walk outside, Daniel brought her across the street from the hospital. She stopped when she saw the building. The old restaurant sign was gone. The polished intimidation of Maison Aurelia had been stripped away. The front windows were brighter now, the lighting softer. The whole place felt human. Above the entrance, new lettering had been installed. Keller Table Marina stared at it. "You bought it," Daniel nodded. "And changed it." She looked at him, confused and close to tears. "Why?" "Because no one should be made to feel small where they work," he said. "Not by a manager, not by a room, not by the people who benefit from silence." Her eyes filled. "Why use my name?" Daniel didn't hesitate. "Because you were the strongest person in this story." A breath caught in her throat. "You protected me when I didn't understand what you were doing. You protected Leo before he was even here. You carried everything alone because you thought that was the only way to keep us safe." She blinked quickly. "I owe you more than an apology." The wind moved a loose strand of hair across her cheek. Without thinking, Daniel reached up and tucked it back gently. She let him. Then they crossed the street together and went inside. By the time Leo came home, the apartment Daniel had once chosen for efficiency no longer felt like a place meant for living. So he sold it. Quietly. He bought a house with too much morning light, a small garden that looked unimpressive in winter and promising by spring, and a kitchen big enough to hold bottles, silence, arguments, and eventually, if they were lucky, peace. He didn't ask Marina to move in with him. He asked if she wanted a place where she and Leo never had to look over their shoulders again. That difference mattered. She noticed it. The first weeks at home were not cinematic. They were messy and exhausted and strangely sacred. Leo woke every 2 hours. Marina still moved carefully on bad days. Daniel learned how to sterilize bottles, warm milk, burp a baby who seemed personally offended by every blanket change, and stay upright on almost no sleep. Some nights Marina cried quietly from exhaustion and turned away, embarrassed. Some nights Daniel stood in the nursery doorway long after Leo had fallen asleep, one hand wrapped around the crib, watching his chest rise and fall as if he still didn't fully trust the world to keep its promises. Trust between them didn't return in one grand confession. It returned in small permissions. She let him drive her to appointments. He learned which tea she actually drank and which one she only pretended to like. She stopped apologizing every time she needed help. He stopped filling silence with solutions. They learned each other again, not as the husband and wife they had once been, but as two changed people standing in the remains of something they had both lost for different reasons. Meanwhile, Victor Hale and Adrian Kessler discovered what fear felt like from the other side. The charges expanded quickly once investigators started pulling at threads. Coercion, financial extortion, labor violations, witness intimidation. Old complaints resurfaced. Former employees spoke. Two women who had once been too afraid to file formal statements changed their minds when they saw Hale in handcuffs on the news. Kessler's business holdings began to crack under audit pressure. Daniel attended one hearing, only one. He sat in the back row beside Marina, who kept her eyes forward the entire time. Victor tried not to look at them. Kessler did once, then looked away when he realized there was no weakness left to aim at. Afterward, outside the courthouse, Daniel expected Marina to say something about justice or revenge. Instead, she only exhaled and said, "I'm tired." He understood immediately. So he drove her home. That was the real difference now. He no longer confused winning with healing. Months passed. Leo grew, heavier in Daniel's arms, louder in the mornings, less fragile. One evening, long after the court case had faded from headlines into paperwork, Marina found Daniel at the kitchen counter with several documents spread out in front of him. He looked up. For a brief second, he looked almost shy. "What is it?" she asked. Daniel glanced down at the papers. "The final trust documents," he said. "The Family Support Fund for NICU parents. Housing help, transport stipends, emergency childcare, overnight rooms. It's permanent now." Marina stepped closer. He turned the folder so she could see. At the top of the page was the name, the Leo Keller Mercer Foundation. She looked at him, eyes already bright. "You used my name first." The smallest smile touched his mouth. That seemed obvious. She touched the edge of the paper, then looked down at the pen in his hand. It was the same fountain pen he had once used to sign their divorce. And now it had signed this, a promise instead of an ending. Neither of them said anything about it. They didn't have to. That night, after Leo finally fell asleep against Daniel's chest in the nursery rocker, Marina stood in the doorway watching them. Daniel looked up carefully so he wouldn't wake the baby. For years, he had believed strength looked like distance. Now it looked like staying still long enough for someone small to feel safe. Marina crossed the room and sat beside him on the edge of the rug. For a while, neither of them spoke. Then she said quietly, "I hated you for a while." Daniel nodded. "I know. I hated that you signed the papers so fast." His throat tightened. "I hated me for that too." She looked at Leo's sleeping face. "I kept telling myself it was better if you thought I chose something selfish. Better that than you finding out too early and getting pulled into what they were planning." Daniel answered with the honesty he had learned too late but intended to keep. "I should have fought for the truth." She let that sit between them. Then, after a long silence, she rested her head lightly against his shoulder. Not a dramatic reunion, not forgiveness wrapped in speeches. Something smaller, more valuable. Trust, returning carefully. Leo's tiny fingers moved in his sleep and curled around Daniel's thumb. Daniel didn't move. Not this time. The next morning, sunlight spilled across the nursery floor. The house was quiet except for the soft hum of the baby monitor and a kettle beginning to heat downstairs. Marina woke first and stood in the doorway for a moment, watching Daniel asleep in the chair with Leo on his chest, one protective arm curved around him even in sleep. She smiled before she could stop herself. When Daniel woke, stiff-necked and disoriented, he looked almost embarrassed. "You were supposed to wake me," he murmured. Marina took Leo gently and said, "You looked like someone who finally stopped running." Later that afternoon, they walked slowly through the small garden behind the house. Winter hadn't fully released its grip yet, but there were signs of change in the soil and the first hint of green near the fence. Daniel looked at Marina. "We don't have to define this today." She studied him for a moment and nodded. "I know." That was what made it possible. No pressure. No grand declaration trying to force the future into shape before it was ready. Just two people who had lost nearly everything and were learning how to build again without fear. Across the city, Keller Table stayed busy for very different reasons than the restaurant that had existed before it. Staff turnover vanished, fair wages held, pregnant workers had flexible shifts, healthcare support, and actual places to sit. No one was humiliated in public. No one was asked to pretend pain didn't exist just because it was inconvenient. Daniel visited rarely. It was never about ownership. It was about repair. One evening, months later, he and Marina stopped in near closing time. A young server thanked another employee for covering 10 minutes so she could sit down and drink water. Nobody rolled their eyes. Nobody made a joke. Marina noticed Daniel watching. "You did this," she said. He shook his head. "No, I responded to what you survived." She looked around the room, then back at him. "That still counts." On the walk home, Leo asleep in his stroller, Daniel let his hand drift toward hers. Not insisting, offering. Marina looked down at it, then at him, and placed her hand in his. This time he didn't hold too tightly. He simply held on, because they had both learned the same thing in different ways. You can misunderstand someone for years and still tell the truth before the story ends. You can fail badly and still choose differently after. You can come terrifyingly close to losing everything and still rebuild something gentler, wiser, and worth trusting. And sometimes the strongest love is not the kind that begins perfectly. It is the kind that survives being broken, tells the truth at last, and stays. If this story moved you, tell me in the comments. Have you ever misunderstood someone you loved until the truth changed everything? And if you want more stories like this, subscribe.